Welcome back, my beautiful friends. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Up in just a few minutes, we have our influencer segment brought to you by ogpay.com. And today we are featuring the amazing Buck Sexton. For those of you who have not heard of him, can't imagine, he's a widely popular radio and television talk show host and conservative political commentator. He's also the co-host with Clay Travis of the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show, which is a nationally syndicated talk radio show. And you can listen to them live right here on 710 WR, the voice of New York, Friday from 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. Now, today we're chatting about the Inflation Reduction Act and what it aims to really accomplish. As Democrats achieve their goal of jamming through the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, reality is becoming very clear, my friends. Using the fancy Congressional Budget Office's latest scoring estimates of the changes and accounting for all the expensive gimmicks, it's likely that the bill will produce deficits. What we know is that the bill will likely increase near-term inflation, depress household incomes, and produce the long-term deficits that fuel long-term inflation. So counterproductive. Now, the cumulative deficit would be around $52 billion over the next 4 years, and that's at least $110 billion through the fiscal year to 2031. That would mean adding to near-term and long-term inflationary pressures. And in hindsight, this budget could be as far away from a genuine Inflation Reduction Act as possible. Now, more like a litany of policies aimed at scoring political points that have been really recklessly put together is what this is. Now, this Inflation Reduction Act utilizes 3 sets of common congressional gimmicks to mask its true costs. You ready? Cherry-picked expiration dates, we'll get to that in just a bit, ignoring net interest costs because the geniuses that calculated all of this are in fact not that intelligent, and indirect tax burdens. Of course, we the people will have to dish out and dish back all that stimulus money. And here to chat some more and give us his opinion is the awesome iHeart radio host, Buck Sexton. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Zen, thanks for having me back.
Okay, here we go. So one major overestimation of savings presented by this bill is a claim to $204 billion, Buck, in increased revenues from cracking down on tax fraud. Now, the legislation includes $80 billion in increased IRS funding over 10 years. Buck, is an army of new IRS agents coming for our tax dollars?
What else are they going to do? The idea that what the American people need or even deserve right now is a whole lot more bureaucrats who are going to have the explicit and express purpose of squeezing more money out of them. I mean, that's what this is going to be. Most of the analyses that I've seen from serious places, not, Biden propaganda machines, show that this is likely to fall. A lot of the tax burden, increased tax burden, will fall on small businesses. As we know, the collectivists, the Democrats, they hate small businesses as a general thing. I mean, there are exceptions. They like big business because big business and big government tend to go hand in hand. Anti-competitive practices, big donations for the party that will make sure that monopolies like Google and Amazon and others are protected. So, yeah, I think what we see is the IRS going to be supercharged, IRS on steroids, however you want to say it. And this is going to be really annoying because the tax code is opaque on purpose and nobody even really knows what they're supposed to pay. Yeah, that's the reality of it.
And not only is this going to be annoying, but let me actually break it down. So there's 87,000 new IRS agents that are going to be coming to audit ordinary taxpayers. But this is the crazy part. So according to an IRS source, a significant portion of the $20 billion estimated by CBO, and CBO is the Congressional Budget Office, would be recouped from wealthier people who are underreporting their income. Now, the IRS claims that people are trying to look like they are under $400K when actually they are well above it. But this feels like a witch hunt for the upper class if you really look at it from hindsight.
Well, the truth is that the people that always get the roughest stuff from the IRS are income earners as opposed to major asset havers, if you will, people that have a lot of stocks, a lot of homes. They also tend to have much better accounting and legal representation. So, if you go after somebody who has $10 million in the bank or $1 billion in the bank, much more so, you're going to find someone who has the ability and the resources to fight an audit. If you're making $100,000 a year in New York City, if you're a small business owner, maybe pulling in $150,000, the IRS says you owe us $10,000 more than you think you do. That hurts because of the relative to the amount of income that person's getting. And also to fight it will probably cost more than what it would cost to just pay it. So the calculation for people becomes, well, I don't want to keep getting dragged into this, so I'll just write them, as painful as it may be, I'll write them this check for 10 or 15 or 20 grand. And that played out millions of times across the country is effectively what audits really often become. I mean, they'll do some higher level audits of big name people just because that's then deterrence. They'll say it's deterrence enforcement or deterrence prosecution, but that's not where the money is. I mean, the money is with everyday folks. And I think our tax code is a joke. I think it's appalling that we have thousands and thousands of pages. That this should all be on a postcard. This should be a one-page thing. I mean, the flat tax or fair tax, whichever one you want to advocate for, I think makes so much more sense. And this is also just a function of government thinking that the answer is to always spend more and tax more. This is what Democrats do. This is who they are. They believe they can spend money better than the people who make the money. And they always want to promise more. And then they're just going to try to play the redistribution game and try to make sure that they act like they're the heroes of the working class when they're actually making it harder for everybody.
Very true. Very true. Those are wise words. You should.
I have a lot of wise words. That's what I do. Wise words.
I know, I see your quotes. But to really add insult to injury, almost every provision of this bill is going to bleed the bank accounts of American families. And tragically, the deficit and inflation increasing aspects of the Inflation Reduction Act are only the beginning of its burdens, Buck. But let's move on to this Green New Deal policy. Okay, so Americans right now are suffering the weight of high inflation. And two areas where that pain is really being felt especially hard is at the gas pump and at the grocery store. So regular retail gas prices are about double what they were when President Joe Biden took office. Food prices, the inflation is at levels not seen in more than 40 years. The Biden administration can try and play all the word games they want, but the Inflation Reduction Act may be the biggest misinformation campaign yet, right? I mean, this is what this is feeling like.
They're calling it an inflation bill when it's not actually going to reduce inflation. If anything, it'll probably increase it a little bit. Inflation, as Milton Friedman said, always and everywhere is a function of monetary policy. So this is because of what the government, this is not anything other than people that say, oh, it's about the expanding economy because of all the demand, because of COVID. Bullcrap. Inflation is a function of the government putting more dollars in circulation and devaluing the currency in the process. So we all see what's going on here. But, ultimately, the ability to spend money is the ability to wield and use power. And that's what Democrats come into office to do. They're not there to safeguard the Constitution and allow for the flourishing of the American marketplace. In their minds, they are there to find ways to involve themselves in as much as possible, to dictate to everybody as much as they can, and make you do things because they know better. I mean, this is at the heart of all collectivist ideology. It's something that Democrats, who are increasingly socialists in their economic outlook, it's obvious. I mean, they don't like that term. We've had more and more of them adopted openly in recent years. And so they're not going to help people economically. That's clear. The Green New Deal boondoggle aspects of this should be deeply offensive to anybody. But the problem is you talk numbers and even right now we're talking about all this stuff. A lot of people are like,
yeah,
this stuff matters, but it doesn't sound exciting. It doesn't, it's not.
Well, it doesn't sound exciting until you really look at this and look at the flip side, because the misinformation is mind-boggling here. But Biden's imposed shift away from conventional fuels that provide us affordable and real abundant energy is going to shift even further. So if you're an oil company or a refiner, why invest? Especially when this bill is telling them that Washington politicians want to kill off their industry. That's going to affect my bottom line at the pump. In fact, rising energy prices are not unintended consequences of their policies, but rather the envisioned outcomes. And that's key here. This is not something the administration has been shy about acknowledging. If we could go back to a statement that Biden recently said, is when it comes to the gas prices, we're going through an incredible transition that is taking place that, God willing, when it's over, we'll be stronger and the world will be stronger and less reliant on fossil fuels when this is over. And keeping with the party's mentality, you also have then President Barack Obama. He said, under my plan, electricity rates would necessarily skyrocket. Then you can go back to Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, reportedly argued that more Americans should purchase electric vehicles so that they'll never have to worry about gas prices again. So in the end, Buck, the way I see it, there's little to no regard for the high prices incurred by Americans and the costs that will arise for trying to achieve this very radical climate agenda, period, in the end.
Well, I mean, climate change is a religious belief. I mean, the moment that you understand, and they say, "What? You don't believe in climate change?" I mean, the climate's been changing always and always will. It's been changing forever and will continue to do so. What the climate change movement is all about, and it's interesting how they've even changed the description of the movement from the fight against global warming. And remember all the stuff we heard about the ozone layer. I mean, there's the desire for a doomsday environmentalist panic is something that has been with us for a long time in certain segments of the population. I mean, there's just people that they're looking for meaning, they're looking for purpose, and they think they find it in these imaginary struggles against the end of the world that they engage in, mostly by lecturing their friends and neighbors about how, like, you shouldn't be driving that car, and by occasionally recycling or whatever. I mean, it's so stupid that they even created essentially a false idol. I mean, they were worshiping a 16-year-old girl who was going around the world lecturing everyone on what multi-trillion-dollar economies should be doing when it comes to their energy policy. And adults who think they're smart were not only, I mean, they weren't just clapping for this. I mean, they were enamored with it. They thought that she was saving the world because unfortunately, the climate change catastrophism mentality very quickly, I think, exposes itself as a mental illness, the same way that, COVID catastrophism does. I mean, these people, there's something wrong with them. I mean, they're effectively living out an anxiety disorder and making us all live through the rest of it. Because what could be crazier than someone who really thinks the world is going to end unless you adopt my obscure policy proposal? I shouldn't say obscure, but worthless policy proposals, better way of saying it, because it won't actually, even by the numbers they give you, change anything in a meaningful enough way to avert the catastrophe that they think will befall us. So why are we being lectured about this all the time? Your point about the price of energy, they want people to suffer who use fossil fuels. I mean, they actually think that this is something that you should, almost the way that they view taxation of cigarettes and alcohol as, it's really just a way for the government to get fat and happy from taking more money from people, especially a lot of people who don't have a lot of spare income anyway. They view fossil fuels the way that they view cigarettes and alcohol, where it's just, we should drive the price up because it will enrich the coffers of the state. And also we should punish people for their grossness. And that's windmills, great. You want to get solar panels in your house. You can't afford groceries, but solar panels in your house, Biden, they're all about this stuff. But
yeah. Well, listen, I'm going to cut to a commercial break because I want to hear more. I love what you're saying, and it's resonating. It's hitting really close to home, but I'm glad you're saying it and not me. But at the end of the day, when the federal government attempts to print its way out of fiscal irresponsibility, it does so by imposing an inflation tax on every American household. But the best path to take would be to drop the distortionary tax increases and spending subsidies and instead reduce the deficit by just cutting spending. It's just a very simple mathematical thing, but they can't get it right. Listen, Buck, it was a pleasure chatting with you. We'll be right back after this commercial break. Please stay put. Don't move a muscle. Guys, you have to check out Buck Sexton at the Clay and Buck Show. You definitely can listen to them Monday through Friday, 12 to 3 p.m. right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR. We'll be right back after this.
A Moment of Zen is brought to you by Caldwell Soames Incorporated, investing globally in transformative businesses like Original Digital Corporation, or ODC. ODC develops advanced consumer and commercial fintech solutions such as OG Pay, which will transform the way you manage your money. From sending and receiving money globally for free, paying for goods and services in person and online, pay bills, buy and sell digital currencies, all while earning interest. OG Pay is easy to set up, FDIC insured, and your information is secured. Check out ogpay.com.
Welcome back, my beautiful friends. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. Joining us back to the segment is our good friend, Buck Sexton. Welcome back, my friend.
Thank you.
All right, so we're chatting about this Inflation Reduction Act, and we're talking about expanding government-run health plans. So one of the sticky points in this Inflation Reduction Act is that the healthcare provisions are the latest play out of the single payer government run health plan playbook. And the plan would extend the Obamacare COVID-19 expansion 3 more years beyond its current date. And it would force government price controls on pharmaceuticals in Medicare and claim Medicare savings to offset the cost of the entire package. So it seems that there are certain taxpayer-funded handouts and giveaways, Buck, that seem to always get extended in perpetuity. And this was among the first provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act that the Senate Democrats committed to voting for. Think of that one. How is this helping my bottom line?
Well, it's not, but emotion over economics is something the Democrats are very good at. It feels good to push more state money, federal, state, whatever, at people's health care issues, even though, as we see, I mean, the single biggest drain on the budgets of states like New York are Medicaid related. And beyond that, healthcare keeps getting more expensive and crappier the more they do this stuff. It doesn't actually improve the market conditions, doesn't actually improve care, but it is very emotional for people to think that we could only be some of these other countries. And they always talk about these other countries out of context. And in what ways are their health outcomes better? Are their populations just healthier because of lifestyle choices? A lot of things that go into it. But they essentially say that we could all just see any doctor you want, get any healthcare you want, and not really pay anything except the rich people will pay for it. That's the fundamental lie of the entire healthcare system that the Democrats want. And it's pushing forward to that, or they're moving in that direction incrementally with all of the subsidy programs that they have out of Obamacare specifically, and in this expanding it. Obamacare was really mostly a Medicaid expansion program, which people don't realize. It just expanded Medicaid to tens of millions of people, which is actually not very good healthcare because really good doctors and medical systems don't want to take it.
Yeah.
So because it doesn't pay enough, because they have to keep some cost controls in place. So the system just keeps on going through this, but reality is not something Democrats excel at understanding.
No, the true. And then to keep the reported cost of this provision down, they chose 3 years for a very specific reason, because it's what they could afford on paper, Buck. But however, accounting for political reality, these subsidies are likely going to cost at least $147 billion more than what is being reported through fiscal year 2031. So it's kind of misplaced in there. And lastly, the proposal's Medicare price negotiation is another win for single payer government run advocates. When I say single payer approach is when the government pays for medical care without fully embracing socialized medicine. But the so-called Medicare prescription drug negotiation plan has nothing to do with negotiation and everything to do with government price setting. What's going to happen to grandma and gramps in this scenario, Buck?
Oh, it'd be interesting to see. I mean, the issue is that, as I said, big government and big corporations work very well together. And so usually there's actually all kinds of collusion that goes on. I mean, look at big pharma and the federal government and not only the mandating of taking the COVID vaccine as a policy, which the federal government pushed, but also the removal of any liability for it. So you must take this, and if it screws you up, too bad.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to make millionaires out of like secretaries at Pfizer as a result of this because of all the stock options they could exercise. So, and not just Pfizer, obviously Moderna, et cetera. As to the drug prices, look, a lot of seniors vote, and seniors pay a lot for their prescription drugs. And so whoever promises they're going to bring their drug prices down is in the short run going to have some political benefit from it. This is what Democrats are doing. What does it actually mean in the long run for the overall cost of care for seniors? The money's going to come from somewhere. So who's paying for it? What's going to happen? And in what ways are they suggesting that this will benefit seniors in the long run? I mean, that's what I would want to know, because the truth is the Trump administration was also talking about bringing down, allowing for more negotiation with Medicare as opposed to Medicaid for prescription drugs. So there is an issue here, but I just don't ever think that Democrats, because they reject markets in favor of emotional appeal. So I don't think that they're actually going to be doing things here that really do help, even though they know they have to pretend they will.
Yeah,
And that's the problem.
So well said. So well said. And so we're almost
I
out of
tried.
time. But to your point, seniors only need to look at the Department of Veteran Affairs to see a version of this in practice. Seniors should really expect less access to critical drugs and treatment and treatment than they have today, really. And everyone will be harmed by lack of newer drugs and cures being developed as a result in the future. So this is just so counterproductive and counterintuitive. But yeah, you're right. They can't get it. Listen, I know we're out of time. You are a busy man with places to be and people to see, but I want to thank you for coming on, Buck. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Great talking to you.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Guys, that was the awesome Buck Sexton. Check him out right here, 12 to 3, Monday through Friday on 710 WR, the voice of New York. You're listening to A Moment of Zen. We'll be right back after this.